For decades, Microsoft didn't just dominate PC gaming, it owned it. If you wanted to play the latest games, you needed Windows. Developers built their games for Windows. Graphics cards were optimized for Windows. Everything revolved around Microsoft's ecosystem. It looked like an empire that could never fall. But while Microsoft was busy protecting its throne, another company was quietly building an escape plan. Not to beat Windows overnight, but to make it unnecessary. And today, millions of gamers are already using the first pieces of that plan without even realizing it. Back in the early 2010s, Windows had something economists call a network effect. Everyone used Windows because every game supported Windows. And every game supported Windows because everyone used Windows. It was a perfect cycle. The more people joined, the stronger Microsoft's position became. From the outside, breaking that cycle looked impossible. But Valve wasn't trying to break it. Valve was trying to avoid it completely. Instead of fighting Microsoft on its own battlefield, it decided to build a new one. In 2013, Valve surprised the gaming world. Instead of announcing another blockbuster game, it introduced SteamOS, a free operating system based on Linux. The idea sounded exciting. A gaming platform that didn't rely on Windows. But almost immediately, reality hit. Nearly every PC game was built for Windows. Without Windows compatibility, SteamOS couldn't compete. Then came another bold experiment: Steam machines. Gaming PCs running SteamOS instead of Windows. Valve believed they could become the future of PC gaming. Instead, they became one of Valve's biggest failures. Sales were disappointing. Gamers stayed with Windows. Developers ignored the platform. Most people assumed Valve had lost. But that's exactly where the story becomes interesting. Because Steam machines were never the real mission. They were just the test. While everyone focused on the failure, Valve quietly started working on something much bigger. Instead of convincing thousands of developers to rebuild their games, Valve asked a different question. What if Linux could simply run Windows games? At the time, it sounded impossible. But that single idea would eventually become one of the smartest decisions in gaming history. Valve called it Proton. And almost nobody paid attention. That would turn out to be Microsoft's biggest mistake. What exactly was Proton? Imagine buying a PlayStation game, then running it perfectly on an Xbox. That's essentially what Valve was trying to do. Instead of asking developers to rebuild thousands of games for Linux, Valve built a compatibility layer that translated Windows game instructions into something Linux could understand. To gamers, it felt like magic. Click play, and many Windows games simply worked. No complicated setup. No virtual machines, no technical knowledge, just gaming. Every year, Proton became better. Hundreds of compatible games became thousands. Performance improved. More developers started testing their games on Linux. Slowly, the biggest reason people needed Windows began to disappear. And most people didn't even notice. Then, in 2022, Valve released the Steam Deck. At first glance, it looked like another handheld console. But it wasn't. It was proof. Proof that modern PC gaming no longer required Windows. The Steam Deck ran SteamOS, a Linux-based operating system. Yet thousands of Windows games played surprisingly well. For the first time, people weren't talking about Linux. They were simply playing games. That's exactly what Valve wanted. If gamers stopped caring about the operating system, Microsoft's biggest advantage would slowly disappear. Not because Windows became worse, but because it became less important. So, did Microsoft see this coming? Maybe, but its priorities were somewhere else. Windows was evolving. Microsoft invested heavily in cloud gaming, Game Pass, artificial intelligence, Copilot. The company believed the future of gaming was becoming connected, intelligent, and subscription-based. Valve believed something completely different. It believed gamers wanted freedom. The freedom to play their games on whatever device they wanted, without being locked into a single operating system. Two companies, two completely different visions of the future. Does that mean Windows is finished? Not even close. Windows is still the king of PC gaming. Most gamers still use it. Many competitive games still work best on Windows. And SteamOS still has limitations. But that's no longer the most interesting question. The real question is this: what happens when gamers finally have a real choice? History has shown us something fascinating. Powerful platforms rarely disappear overnight. They slowly become optional. And that's exactly what Valve has been building for more than a decade. Not a Windows killer, but a Windows alternative. A quiet escape route. One that millions of gamers are already walking through, without even realizing it. Microsoft still owns the PC gaming throne. But for the first time in decades, someone has built another road. Whether that road becomes the future depends on what happens over the next few years. Because if there's one thing the tech industry has taught us, it's that the biggest revolutions don't begin with explosions. They begin quietly. Until one day, everyone realizes the world has already changed. And speaking of companies that completely changed an industry without anyone noticing, the next story might be even more unbelievable.